Picture this: a queen so brilliant she outsmarted empires, a love so fiery it burned through kingdoms, and an ending so defiant it stunned even Rome. This is the true story of Cleopatra, not just the beauty who enchanted Caesar and Antony, but the genius who rewrote history, until her final shocking act, ready to unravel the myths. Cleopatra VII's legacy remains one of the most captivating in all of history. Renowned for her striking beauty, sharp intellect, and legendary romances with Roman leaders Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, her name has been forever etched into the tapestry of time. Though her life ended tragically at just 39 years old, her story continues to intrigue us. And today we'll uncover the reasons behind her fate. Born around 69 to 68 BC, Cleopatra VII of Philippater entered the world long after Alexander the Great's conquest of Egypt in 332 BC. Inheriting a kingdom shaped by centuries of Greek influence. After Alexander the Great's death, his trusted general Ptolemy I took control of Egypt. A close companion of the Macedonian conqueror, Ptolemy assumed the throne when Egypt fell under his rule. But let's skip ahead. When Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, passed away in 51 BC, she and her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, were thrust into power as co-rulers. Their marriage, a customary but inescapable practice at the time, sealed their partnership. However, conflict soon arose. By 49 BC, Cleopatra was forced into exile in Syria after her brother's advisors turned against her. Undeterred, she gathered an army of mercenaries and began strategizing her return, determined to reclaim Egypt's throne. During this turbulent period, the Roman general Pompey was locked in a power struggle with Julius Caesar. After suffering a crushing defeat at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, Pompey fled to Egypt, only to meet a brutal end when Ptolemy XIII ordered his assassination. Hoping to win Caesar's favor, Ptolemy likely believed he had done Rome a service by eliminating its enemy. But then came Cleopatra's bold move. Legend has it that she secretly entered Caesar's chambers, pleading for his support to overthrow her brother. Whether fact or fiction, her persuasion worked. Soon after, war erupted between Caesar's legions and Ptolemy's forces, sealing Egypt's fate. Ptolemy XIII suffered defeat and was forced to flee Alexandria, only to meet his rumored demise in the Nile's treacherous currents. With her brother gone, Caesar reinstated Cleopatra as Egypt's ruler, this time alongside her even younger sibling, 13-year-old Ptolemy XIV. Soon after, Cleopatra gave birth to Caesar's son Caesarion, playfully nicknamed Little Caesar, though the Roman dictator never officially acknowledged his paternity. Cleopatra later followed Caesar to Rome, where his dramatic assassination unfolded. 23 brutal stab wounds at the hands of conspiring senators. With Rome in chaos, she swiftly returned to Egypt. Not long after, Ptolemy XIV died under suspicious circumstances, his young passing shrouded in mystery. With her brother gone, Cleopatra now ruled Egypt alongside her young son Caesarion, who was crowned as Ptolemy XV. To solidify her authority and divine right to rule, the cunning queen strategically aligned herself with the goddess Isis, Egypt's revered deity of magic, motherhood, and royal power. This calculated move transformed Cleopatra's image from a mere mortal ruler to a living embodiment of the divine, further legitimizing her reign in the eyes of her people. Throughout history, monarchs from Egypt to distant lands have bolstered their rule by claiming divine connections, a timeless strategy to cement power and legitimacy. Cleopatra mastered this art, appearing before her subjects as the living incarnation of Isis to secure her throne. Yet despite her political cunning, nature conspired against her reign. When the Nile's life-giving floods failed, Egypt faced catastrophe. Withered crops, soaring grain prices, and widespread famine gripped the kingdom. The queen who presented herself as a goddess now confronted the very mortal challenge of feeding her starving people. As Rome descended into political chaos following Caesar's assassination, his loyal allies, Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, known as the Second Triumvirate, clashed with his conspirators. Both factions sought Cleopatra's support, forcing her into a high-stakes decision. Demonstrating shrewd political instincts, she dispatched 4 Roman legions, originally stationed in Egypt by Caesar, to bolster the triumvirate's forces. This strategic move paid off. In 42 BC, their united armies crushed Caesar's assassins at the decisive Battle of Philippi, reshaping Rome's balance of power. With Rome's power now split between Mark Antony and Octavian, Antony summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus in Cilicia, but the Egyptian queen transformed this political summons into a legendary spectacle. Arriving aboard a magnificent barge, she presented herself as the living incarnation of Isis, draped in the goddess's sacred robes. The dramatic entrance worked perfectly. Antony, already grateful for her military support against Caesar's assassins, found himself utterly captivated. History records how their meeting ignited a passionate alliance, both romantic and political. The smitten Roman general vowed to defend Cleopatra's throne, including against her most dangerous foes like her exiled sister Arsinoe IV, who had previously challenged Cleopatra's rule. Antony, utterly bewitched by Cleopatra's allure, abandoned his wife and children in Rome to join her in Egypt, a scandalous desertion that shocked the Roman elite. This reckless passion unfolded against the backdrop of his escalating rivalry with Octavian. Though the two had divided Rome's territories after their victory at Philippi, their fragile alliance was crumbling. Lepidus, the third member of the triumvirate, watched helplessly from the sidelines as his influence dwindled to near irrelevance. The stage was set for a catastrophic clash of empires and egos. While Rome simmered with tension, Antony reveled in Cleopatra's company during their legendary winter together in Alexandria. Their political alliance blossomed into both romance and strategic partnership. He restored key Roman territories to her control, while she promised 200 warships for his impending Parthian campaign. When military duties forced Antony's departure, their connection endured across the years through coded letters and a network of royal spies embedded in his camps. Their passionate union produced twins, Alexander Helios, Sun, and Cleopatra Selene II, Moon, whom Antony proudly claimed as his own, further intertwining Egyptian and Roman destinies. The twins' celestial names, Alexander Helios, the Sun, and Cleopatra Selene II, the Moon, weren't just poetic whimsy. They were a bold declaration of Cleopatra's divine authority, positioning her children as rulers destined to illuminate the world. Meanwhile, back in Rome, Antony's abandoned wife Fulvia refused to fade quietly into obscurity. Whether driven by jealous fury or political calculation, historians still debate her motives, she launched what became known as the Perusian War against Octavian. Some ancient sources whisper that this was Fulvia's desperate gambit to reclaim Antony's attention, while modern scholars argue the conflict was inevitable given Rome's fracturing power structure. Regardless of intent, the campaign proved disastrous. Fulvia's forces were crushed, forcing her into humiliating exile while her estranged husband remained blissfully entangled in Cleopatra's golden world. Fulvia's story ended in bitter tragedy. She died en route to what might have been a final, futile attempt at reconciliation with Antony. Meanwhile, the political winds in Rome shifted violently against him. Former allies defected to Octavian's camp, forcing Antony into an uneasy truce sealed by a marriage of pure convenience to Octavian's half-sister Octavia. This was no love match, but a cold diplomatic calculation. While Antony navigated these treacherous Roman waters, Cleopatra's Egypt flourished under her shrewd leadership. The Nile kingdom prospered, its people content, its queen's authority unquestioned. When Antony's Parthian campaign floundered, he turned once more to his Egyptian ally. Cleopatra supplied vital military support, and in a controversial move, Antony repaid her by restoring several long-lost territories to Egyptian control, lands Rome had seized decades earlier, and bestowing kingdoms upon their children. This extravagant gift would later give Octavian powerful ammunition against them both. The territories Antony bestowed upon Cleopatra formed a glittering mosaic of Mediterranean power. Fragments of Syria and Lebanon's cedar-rich coasts, the copper-rich island of Cyprus, the strategic lands of Crete, and portions of what we now call Libya. When the lovers reunited, Antony finally met his twin children, their celestial namesakes, now flesh and blood symbols of this Greco-Egyptian-Roman fusion. As they strategized about Herod's growing threat in Judea and Antony's military ambitions, their political and passionate bonds flared anew. With these lands under her crook and flail, Cleopatra's dominion reached its zenith. But across the sea, Octavian masterfully weaponized Roman xenophobia. "Since when does Rome kneel to an Oriental queen?" his propagandist whispered through the forum. The donations stung Roman pride. Why should Egypt's monarch, that decadent daughter of the Nile, command what Roman blood had conquered? Senators bristled at the affront. Plebeians muttered about Eastern witchcraft corrupting their generals. The stage was set for civilization's greatest clash. Octavian, ever the political puppeteer, weaponized Antony's scandalous abandonment of Octavia, his virtuous Roman wife, casting it as a moral crisis for the Republic. With calculated piety, he commissioned statues of the wronged matron throughout Rome's forums, turning Antony's personal life into patriotic theater. "Behold how your general trades Roman dignity for Eastern decadence," his whispers implied. Meanwhile, Cleopatra accompanied Antony's war machine as it rumbled toward Parthia, her golden barge floating alongside his legions like a living standard. But the campaign trail bore unexpected fruit. She returned to Alexandria heavy with child, where she later delivered Ptolemy Philadelphus, brother-loving, a name echoing both Ptolemaic tradition and the unspoken hope that this son might unite what his father's choices had fractured. Antony's Parthian expedition collapsed into catastrophe. Tens of thousands of legionnaires left dead in the mountains, their eagles lost to barbarian hands. The broken remnants of his army staggered back to the Phoenician coast, where the scent of cedar and salt air did little to mask their shame. In Beirut's battered harbor, Antony waited like a wounded lion for Cleopatra's reinforcements. When her ships finally appeared, sails dyed Tyrian purple, they carried more than soldiers. They offered a choice. Rome meant humiliation before the Senate's wolves. Alexandria promised restoration in the arms of his queen. He chose love over duty. Back in Egypt's glittering capital, Antony rebuilt his forces, even accepting Octavian's gift of fresh legions, a poisoned charity. The troops came not as brothers in arms, but as living taunts, their very presence a reminder that Octavian now controlled Rome's beating heart. Some whispered the young Caesar sent them not to aid, but to spy, and to let Antony know he was being watched. Octavian, now Rome's undisputed master, spun a tale of betrayal that slithered through the forum and coiled around the Senate's throat. Antony would abandon Rome, his birthright, for an Egyptian throne. With cold precision, he stripped Antony of his titles, consul, triumvir, Roman, until only the man remained, exiled by decree. By 32 BC, the declaration came. War, not on Antony, but on Cleopatra. A legal fiction, but a lethal one. The message was clear. This was no civil conflict, but a crusade against a foreign seductress who had stolen Rome's greatest general. When the fleets clashed at Actium in 31 BC, the outcome was written before the first fire ship sailed. Octavian's admiral Agrippa outmaneuvered them, turning the Ionian Sea into a slaughterhouse. Antony and Cleopatra's forces, once the pride of the East, broke like waves against Roman discipline. Their defeat wasn't just military, it was the end of a dream. The lovers fled, their empire reduced to a single ship cutting through the smoke. The shattered remnants of their empire forced Antony and Cleopatra apart. He scoured the desert for loyal soldiers, she to Alexandria's gilded halls, where the Nile's whispers carried warnings of Octavian's approaching legions. Even Herod, Judea's cunning fox, now bared his teeth for Rome, yet defiance flickered once more. At the Hippodrome, Antony's dwindled forces clashed with Octavian's vanguard in a desperate, dusty skirmish, and won. A fleeting victory, but proof the lion still had claws. Then the brutal unraveling. Betrayed by his own men, Antony found himself shackled, not by enemy chains, but by a lie. Cleopatra's message arrived like a dagger. She was dead. The tomb she'd sealed herself inside, a monument turned mausoleum, held not her corpse, but her ruse. Treasures piled high as funeral pyres, her handmaidens weeping on command, all theater to lure Octavian into mercy, or to goad Antony into one final fatal act. When Antony received Cleopatra's message, claiming she had taken her own life, the broken general made his fatal choice. Historians differ on the details. Some say he plunged a sword into his belly. Others claim he used a dagger in a swift, desperate act. But the most poignant account comes from Plutarch, who describes a death both slow and dramatic. Bleeding but still alive, Antony was carried by his loyal soldiers to Cleopatra's sealed tomb. There, the queen, who had faked her suicide, watched in horror as her dying lover was hauled up through a window or balcony into a refuge. Their final embrace was one of grief and regret. At 53 years old, the once great Roman general drew his last breath in the arms of the woman he had sacrificed everything for: his empire, his honor, and ultimately, his life. Captured by Octavian's forces before she could join Antony in death, Cleopatra bargained for one final dignity: the right to embalm her lover and lay him to rest in their prepared tomb. But her captivity came with cruel conditions. Roman historians record her icy confrontation with Octavian. "I will not be led through Rome as your trophy." Though he spared her life, a loyal informant soon revealed his true plan. She and her children were to be paraded in golden chains during his triumph, a living spectacle of Rome's conquest. For Egypt's last pharaoh, this was unthinkable. In August of 30 BC, within her palace's sealed chambers, Cleopatra chose her own exit. Legend claims she died by the bite of an asp, a sacred serpent of divine royalty, while her devoted servants followed her into the afterlife. Whether by poison or another means, her final act was clear. No conqueror would own her story, though popular tales paint her death as the dramatic strike of an asp, a serpent sacred to Egyptian royalty. Historians suspect a quieter, more practical end, a poison-dipped pin hidden in her robes like a queen's last secret. However it happened, her choice was deliberate. Octavian, robbed of his prize, could only see it as the woman who'd outmaneuvered Rome's greatest men slipped forever from his grasp. In a rare concession, he permitted her burial beside Antony, a fleeting mercy for enemies he'd spent years vilifying. And so passed Cleopatra VII, ruler, strategist, and the last pharaoh of an ancient world. Her story transcends history, becoming myth not because of how she died, but how she lived. A woman who wielded love and power with equal precision, whose name still echoes across millennia. Was it tragedy, triumph, or proof that some legacies are too vast for even Rome to conquer? What do you think? Tell us in the comments. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.